at Contently, you say great stories make ideas stick. How do you apply that mantra to both your professional and your personal life? What makes ideas meaningful to you?
This is one of my favorite questions. I actually recently blogged about this as well. One of the main things that we're trying to do at Contently is encourage this idea of storytelling being the most powerful way to change minds and to build businesses and careers. So I think it applies in a few ways, probably three big ways to what we're trying to do. The first is for journalists, if you want to promote yourself and you want to get work, the most important thing is telling your story. And I think that's something that journalists who are great at telling other people's stories often fail to do. And a lot of telling your story is about setting up, it's a little bit about letting go of sort of the humility of, wanting to be behind the page and behind the screen and not sort of be the one up front. But telling your story is about basically what are the stamps of brand equity that you have. That's how I like to think of it for journalists. If you've written for the New York Times, that says something about you. That is a piece of your story, and you should put that up front. For example, the other thing too is in sort of this age of everyone is a freelancer and the internet means you can connect to literally anyone, anywhere in the world, hirers, people who are hiring freelancers, they have the opportunity to hire the most appropriate talent for the job if they can find it, and that's kind of what we're trying to help them do. So the journalist who is able to articulate why they're the most interesting writer about cloud computing or horses or whatever it is really important, because all things being equal, a publisher who's looking or an editor who's looking at you versus someone else with the same clips, if they can see the passion that you have for the subject and the expertise that you're building into sort of a certain niche or a vertical or specialization, that's extremely important to helping you get the job. And the person with that better sort of story behind why they're doing it will win. The other thing is with businesses, a lot of our clients, the people who are hiring these journalists, are brands that are becoming publishers. So because of social media and all the change we're seeing on the internet, everyone's now comfortable reading the status update from the New York Times next to the status update from Oreo, next to the update from your crazy aunt. And so because of that, we're comfortable engaging with these brands, and brands are now hiring journalists to tell stories. It started out, in early days of social media, every brand was like, who loves summer? And then people thumb it up on Facebook and kind of realized that's not as valuable as telling deeply interesting stories that people will share, whether that's about something the brand is doing, which usually isn't that interesting, or it's about something that a brand cares about, which is usually more interesting. So, there's great examples of clients that we have. One is American Express really wants people to know that they care about small business owners. So they started this site called Open Forum where they hire journalists to write about small business stories. And so, they don't want to talk about their own brand, but they want to talk about the thing that users care about, and they connect to those people through stories. And then I think the other sort of third part of it is, as a leader or as an employee or as someone within an organization or as a startup yourself, the story that you tell helps people distinguish you between others in the marketplace, whether they're choosing you for a job or whether they're choosing to go with you as a vendor. There's a great book that I referenced in this post that I recently wrote, probably too many words about this, called Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath, that is about what makes ideas sort of stay with people. And it's usually not the numbers and charts on a PowerPoint slide. There's a number of things. It's about making ideas concrete. It's about making them surprising. But the most important one is telling a story, because when all those numbers and stats fade, you remember the story that was told. And I think it comes from sort of the years and centuries of human history, and that's how we connected. That's how we warned others, about the saber-toothed tiger, and that's how we passed down, religion and all the things that were important to us as a society. And I think that still is a deep part of the way we connect with each other.
Who's one professional writer that you really feel is doing it right? Like, who do you look up to personally?
Well, so there are professional writers who I really love their work and who I aspire to be like. One of my favorites is John Ronson, who's a British writer who does amazing sort of investigative stories, investigative journalism. Usually he writes about people who are weird or who are doing weird things or unbelievable things. But he has this amazing style of narrative where and it's very tough to pull off, but he will often include himself in the story and include you as the reader in the conversations he's having with the sources. His work is some of the fastest reads that you can read for long-form journalism. A professor of mine at journalism school once said, good writing speeds you along. I think his work is a great example of that. There's a million other writers that I really respect, but he's the one that lately, whose work I've really admired for that sort of storytelling, sucking you into sort of a deep topic aspect.
I think you're definitely on that same track because I read that post and I can just imagine you getting the book from your aunt, Andrew Carnegie's book, and coming up with all of this. Yeah.
You were talking about the post about when I graduated from high school, and I got the present of how to win friends and influence people, and kind of at the time I felt like it was kind of cheesy, but actually that's the classic book. It's 100 years old. That's a classic book that turns these stories of these people like Abraham Lincoln and Andrew Carnegie into sort of life lessons or whatever, and I think a lot of authors actually copy that style. So that was an early book that I enjoyed when I was just graduating from high school.
Okay, so from creating computer games all the way to recently turning 29, I'm sure you've encountered some growing pains in the startup scene. What is one of your first big failures, and how do you work differently today because of it?
Okay, one of my first big failures. So I worked on, throughout college and in between college and grad school, I basically supported myself by building websites for small business owners, designing and marketing infographics for media companies and brands, and then building my own sort of websites as I realized I'm building these businesses for people. Why don't I build my own businesses? I learned a lot of lessons through there, and I think the big sort of failure lesson I learned is if you have an idea and you think it's worth turning into a business, don't spend a long time sort of building up to this big launch, but test the idea first before you put all the work in. Sort of the lean startup concept that I learned the hard way. I had a couple of projects that I thought were going to be huge successes, and I was really big into them, and I spent a ton of time, and I did a lot of coding myself, and I hired people to help me, and I ended up pushing off sort of the launch month after month after month because there was just this one feature that I had to have, and no one was going to use it if I didn't do this. And with one of them in particular, in that time, another company with the same idea executed better than I had executed, launched, and did really well. And then I was kind of sunk. And then actually that company ended up not doing very well, and it turned out that the whole underlying premise was something that people didn't really connect with. And I could have saved myself a year of work by having mocked up what it was on a piece of paper, showed it to people, and asked them what they would do and if they would use this. And I think there's a lot of sort of excuse making on my part in terms of, oh, people won't use this, but it's because I don't have this feature, when in reality, the best thing to do is actually see if someone will put their money where their mouth is. We do this a lot at Contently, actually, where we'll be working on an idea for a feature. We'll go out and we'll actually try to sell that. And if people are willing to buy that, then we'll go back and we'll build it, and we'll say, it's going to be 3 months before this is out, but we'll go back and build that once there's already money on the table, rather than just sort of in theory this could work. Spent a lot of time doing a lot of things in the early days that people just wouldn't have wanted. And so that's the big sort of personal failure. I don't know if you want a failure story from Contently. The first couple iterations of our product, we really, God bless all the writers in the world who have a high school degree and think they're writers and want to be good, but it's really hard to filter them from professional journalists who've been working at Time Magazine and now have been laid off and are just so good. And we would like to help all those other sort of amateur writers or up and coming writers. That's why we've built the portfolio system. But in the early days, we had an impossible time distinguishing between people who wanted to be good but weren't, people who were really good, and people who were actually just kind of scummy, make money from home types that just wanted into the system. And so there were a couple of rounds of Contently where we tried to vet people. And the first thing we did was we had a list of bullets of what are the things that you're good at writing about, and everyone put, I'm an expert at everything. So that basically failed. And then the next one we did is we had people write an essay so we could sort of read their work and see how good they were. The people who were willing to put in the time to write an essay were usually the desperate ones, and the people who were not willing to put in the time were usually the really great writers who had better things to do or were skeptical. So we went through a whole series of these things, and then we realized, I think after way too late, that the best way to see how good someone is just to have them show you their actual past work. And that's something that we could actually automate with computers. We could scan their clips, we could figure out who they wrote for, things like how much their work had been shared, what's the reading level, things like that. Anyway, so that was an epiphany that took us far too long to reach after doing all of these cycles. And so I think there were some failures there for sure. But you learn, and that's how I guess businesses are built.
Yeah, well, you mentioned in the beginning that the best way to kind of figure it out is to just go out and ask people, do you like this service? What do you think about that? And in another one of your posts, Shane, you said that a great way for businesses to gain users and find people is to just go out there and give away your secrets. Give away what's really adding value to you. As a startup or as any young entrepreneur, when you're first beginning, that might be scary because, like you said,
Yes.
you want it to be perfect and you don't want anyone else to take your idea. Can you give us some insights on why people should share their secrets with their readers or their users?
Yeah, there's a couple of things in there to unpack. One is I firmly believe that the best marketing is education, that teaching is more effective at getting people to be interested in what you're doing than spending money to sort of put ads in front of them. I mean, that's a lot of what this storytelling thing is about. You teach people, and I think the more you give away, the more people will like you and trust you and respect you. And I think there's two realities. On the sort of the marketing side, if you're giving away your secrets of how to, so for example, for us, how to be a great publisher, by teaching people those things, we potentially are setting up companies to sort of take that education and not use Contently, sort of do things on their own. What inevitably happens is the people who are going to do that are going to do that anyway. And most people, as you educate them, they realize, wow, this stuff is actually much harder than I thought. I need to find a solution, or I need to hire someone. And then you're automatically the first person that comes to mind with that. So that's the one side of it. And then on the side of sort of your business secrets, I think a lot of young entrepreneurs, especially first-time entrepreneurs, and I totally did this. You have a great idea. You want everyone to sign a non-disclosure agreement. You want to get a patent. No one can know about this until the secret day of the launch, and then everyone in the world will know about it, and then you'll be a success. The reality is very few companies, and in fact, I would wager to say almost no companies are successful because of what happens on launch day. They're successful because they've executed a great business better than other people who are executing it, and with a firm business model, and they're able to tell a great story that gets people to buy into what they're doing. So at any given point, you might have a great idea and a super innovative idea for a business. There are 20 other people in the world that probably have that same idea. And you're probably not going to run into those 20 people anyway. And so the people that you tell to get advice and feedback on your idea, that feedback that you get early on is going to be way more important to helping you be successful than sort of the tiny chance that you run into someone who's already working on the same idea. And even if you do, and we have plenty of people that we've that have either pivoted into our space, that we, at one point we were sort of friends and now we're sort of friends that are competing. We've had plenty of those situations, and there are plenty of other competitors that know about us and have been following us. And at a certain point, it just comes down to who believes in this more and who can execute it better. Because at some point, you're going to launch and then all of your competitors are going to know what you're doing anyway. If it's really that good, that being 2 days ahead of everyone, I don't know, like someone is not going to be able to build what you've built, what you've spent months to do, in the amount of time that it will take you to get one step further. And so I think the pros outweigh the cons in terms of telling people about what you're up to and getting feedback early the chances are just so minuscule that someone will dedicate their lives to what you're already passionate about.
Okay, so this next question is for all the startups out there who are extremely content heavy. As a result, simple, clean design is usually pretty hard to achieve. So, I mean, you guys are rocking that. You have tons of content and your site looks fantastic. So,
Thank you.
What are your 2 cents on aesthetic versus function?
So internally, we